Hi, Steve Gale here. In this video, what we're going to do is we're going to configure the application server for the Industry 4.0 project. So this involves installing Apache PHP MySQL and PHP MyAdmin. So what we're going to do now, first of all, is we'll open up a terminal. And in this terminal, we're going to follow along from here. So the instructions are derived from this location here, computingstudies.net/tutorial/Apache2. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sudo apt-get install Apache 2. So we'll let that run. So once Apache is installed, the next thing we need to do is to configure the server name. And the way we do that is by editing the apache2.conf file, and I'll use gedit for that. So I'll copy this command, sudo gedit /etc/apache2, apache2.conf. And right down the very bottom, so I'll just scroll down to the bottom, click in here, add an extra line at the bottom. And what I'll do is I'll use the server name directive, server name, and I'll call it sgi40 demo.local. And I'll save that, and we'll quit out of gedit. Okay, so now that we've updated the server, the next thing we need to do is to restart the Apache service. So I'll do a service Apache 2 restart. And what's the password? So I'll set the password there. Now, just to confirm that Apache is running correctly, what I'll do is I'll browse to localhost. So we'll just go HTTP localhost, and if we see this page, we can see it works. So Apache is functioning correctly. Fantastic. So far, so good. So what we want to do now is to install PHP and MySQL and also PHP MyAdmin. So for the application server for the Industry 4 project. So we need to follow the instructions for Ubuntu 18.04. So that involves installing PHP 7.2, MySQL, and so forth. So I'll copy that command and I'll paste that in there and we'll hit enter. And it's going to require additional 227 meg of disk space, so it might take a little while, and I'll let that run. So now what we're doing is when we're configuring PHP MyAdmin, we need to configure it for Apache 2. And the way we do that is by pressing, if we click in this window and we press spacebar, you can see there's a little asterisk there. And then if we tab across, we can tab to the OK and then hit enter. And that'll install PHP MyAdmin for Apache 2, which is what we want. So now we're looking at configuring PHP MyAdmin, and it's saying PHP MyAdmin must have a database installed and configured. Now we haven't installed and configured any databases. We'll hit yes for that, so just an enter will do that. Click in here, and then yes. And now we need to provide the MySQL password for PHP MyAdmin. And confirm it. Okay, so that's completed. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a restart of Apache 2 now that we've installed the application server. So we'll restart the Apache service, and then we'll do a MySQL secure installation. So sudo MySQL secure installation. And it's asking us about the validate password plugin. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to say no to that. We'll set up the root password for MySQL. Remove anonymous users, yes. Disallow root login remotely, yes. We won't want root to log in remotely onto this MySQL server. Remove the test database, yep. Reload the privilege tables, yes. And we're all done. So now what we'll do is we'll do an update. Followed by an upgrade. And we're all clean. Everything's up to date. Fantastic. So the next thing we want to do is you want to configure the database user for PHP MyAdmin. And what I want to do is I just want to configure a user that has essentially equivalent to root privileges, so can grant privileges to other users, create databases, all of those sorts of things. And that's what I'm going to do in the first instance. So to do that, what I'll do is I'll browse to PHP MyAdmin, localhost PHP MyAdmin. So I'll copy this link address. I'll go into here and I'll paste and go here. And to do this, what I need to do is I need to create a user. Yeah. So I need a username and a password which I can use. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our terminal, and what we're going to do is we're going to run the MySQL console with root privileges. Now we need to use the MySQL root password, which we've set up. And you can see this prompt here. This prompt here is the prompt for the MySQL command line console. So what we want to do is create a user. Now I'm going to create a user called SG with a password of password1. So I'll just paste that. So create user SG at localhost, identified by password1, and you need the semicolon at the end to terminate the SQL query. And query OK, so that user's been created OK. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grant all privileges with the grant option. So you can see here's the command here. Grant all privileges on everything to SG at localhost with the grant option. Now with the grant option means that this user can grant privileges to other users. So the grant all privileges on star.star to SG at localhost with grant option is what's required. So I'll just execute that, and that executes OK. Next thing I'll do is I'll flush the privileges. And then I can quit from there. Quit out of the MySQL console. Okay, so now that I've created this user, SG at localhost, what I can do is I can use that user SG with its password. And I can use that, and I'll save that, in PHP MyAdmin. Okay, fantastic. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a first deploy. We're going to deploy our test code to the prototype web server. And what I'll do is I'll go into CD 2020 I40, and I'll go into the shell script folder cdsh, and I'll do an ls-l in there. Now we can see that these are executable. So these shell scripts need to be executable to be able to deploy the code. So they are actually executable. But if they weren't, then what I would do is I would just say run this command, chmod plus x star.sh, and that would then make them executable. Nothing's changed, as you can see, because they are currently executable, so that's fine. So if I do a cat deploy.sh, you can see here that, again, the first thing that this does is it creates a directory called var ww html I40 test. So what I might do, I might just run up another terminal window and put this under here. Push this one up a bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go cd/var/www/html, and I'll do an ls in there, and you can see all we've got is index.html. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run the deploy.sh. And what deploy.sh will do is it's going to copy all of the PHP code into a folder var www html/i40 test, which will be the root of our application server. So let's run that. Now, if I go in here now and do an ls, you can see I've now got a folder I40 test. If I do an ls in capital T, you can see I've got an admin folder. Actually, I'll go in there. I'll go cd I40 test /admin. Yep. And I'll do an ls-l in there. And you can see here that what I've got here is I've got all of my PHP files. But not only have I got them, but it's also what it's done is it's made the owner of them www.data, so they can be executed by the Apache web server. So the next step here is copy recursively, and you can see it is a recursive copy from /php everything to var www html/i40 test, and that's what it's done. And it's changed ownership recursively to www.data of everything that's in that folder. Yep. So that's deploy.sh. Now there's two folders. There's two files in here. There's deploy, but there's also deploy changes. And the only difference between the two is that deploy changes doesn't have this line in it, because you only need to create the folder once. So once the folder has been created, then it's just a case of copying the updated files if there's any changes, and making sure that www.data owns them all, so that they can be processed and executed by the Apache service. Okay. So now that we've done that deployment and we've installed Apache and we've installed the applications, the PHP application server, we should be able to execute some of these things. So for example, we should be able to create the database, create the room data table, display the data, and so forth. Yep, we should be able to do that now. Okay, so we'll minimize this one. Come back to here. So if we now go to localhost /i40 test, which is the root of our application server, you can see here we've got an admin folder. If you click in there, we've got the PHP files. So if we try and run the create database at this point, it's going to fail. And the reason it will fail is because we haven't created a user for the PHP code to be able to access the database. So you can see here, connection failed, access denied for user I40 at localhost, using password equals yes. So what we need to do is we need to add a new user to the database. So we're up to this point here, add new user to the database, and we need to add this I40 user into our database. So if we go in here, we can see here, if we look at databases, we haven't created the database yet, but what we want to do, and I'll just make this, actually no, I won't make it full screen, is what we want to do is more, and we want to go to user accounts, and we want to add a user account. So if I go into username, the username here is capital I40. So this is the user that PHP is going to use to interact with the database. And here I've got the option of any host, but I don't want to allow any host access to this user. I just want to use localhost. Yeah. The password here is password1. So I'll copy that, paste it in there, paste it in there. I'll just leave that by default. I don't want to create a database. I don't want to grant all privileges. But what I want to do, what privileges does this user actually need? Well, we need to do data activities like select, insert, update, and delete. But if I wanted finer grained control, if I wanted this user to only be able to do selects and inserts and not deletes, I could take the delete off. The file, well, do we really need that? We probably don't. Allows importing data and exporting data into files. We'll leave that. We need to be able to create and alter database tables. So this is create new database and tables. Alter the structure of existing tables, yes. Creating indexes, yes. Dropping, no, we probably don't need to drop database and tables. I think that's probably all it needs. I think we'll just run with that and see how we go. Require none because we're not using SSL. And down the very bottom here, there should be a go button. And with a bit of luck, won't save that. Scroll over here. You can see here, this is the code that's been executed and you've added a new user. Okay. So now if we go back to here, back to here, and we go back and we rerun this, hopefully we can create our database. Yep, database created successfully. So the next thing we need to do is create a table. So we can run the SQL query to the PHP, which will then run the SQL query to create the table for us. And the test data table's been created successfully. And then if we try to display table data, we'll find that we don't have any data in there currently. And you can see here we've got 0 results. Okay, so what we've done is we've successfully done our first deploy. We've deployed our prototype code to the web server. We've added a new database, and we're able to create the database, create the table, and display the data there.